I appreciate you coming here tonight for the candidates running for Congressman for the 11th District. However, we're joined by a special guest that we want to give a moment to greet you, to say a few words or more than a few to this crowd, because we believe when a group of Republicans get together and there's a race to be run, that we ought to hear from as many of our candidates as we can, and we kept it to federal races. This congressional race is, and the Senate race is. You saw when you came in, both campaigns, the Kingston campaign and the Purdue campaign were afforded the opportunity of a table in our lobby. We thought that was the right thing to do. Both candidates were invited, and unfortunately, Mr. Purdue could not make it, but we have the distinct honor of having Georgia's congressman from the 1st District, who has served with distinction since 1992, and is a candidate for the U.S. Senate. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Jack Kingston.
Scott, thank you very much, and thank you for all the support and the friendship that you have given me and all the other candidates. You know, I've had the opportunity to represent 41 South Georgia counties, and I represent the city of Woodbine, Georgia. And one time, there was a special election for a city council seat in Woodbine. Small town, probably 600 to 800 people, I'm not exactly sure, but 9 people qualified. And then they had the debate. And there's no doubt, Bob, that those people who showed up for the debates, which are, you know, there's butterflies in your stomach. And the question came to all 9 candidates, why are you running for office? Well, of course, the first person said for the future. The second person said for the children. The third person said for the seniors. And it went on and on to the 9th candidate who said, well, to tell you the truth, my dad told me everybody ought to run for office once, and I thought I'd go ahead and get it out of the way. And he was elected. and I'm not making that story up, by the way. I know this guy well. He's been a good city councilman. But I heard a statistic today that only 5% of the people in our country actually give, campaign, or run for office. 5% in a country of 311 million. That is so sad. But indeed, you are one of those 5% by the mere fact that you're here tonight, and the fact that so many of you we see as candidates so many times when we depend on you to get the job done and build the team and build the building block. What I am concerned about is that those of you who are here generally are voluntary. We're running up against a machine in the other party where they have a built-in infrastructure. People who have something to personally gain by the outcome of the election. It's very tough for us because they do seem to have the infrastructure. And it's also hard because so often we seem to be the party who is selling broccoli, competing against a party that's giving away ice cream. And it makes it tough for us out there. But we have got to fight. And I certainly would put our team against their team any day. But the reality is, regardless of the outcome of these primaries around the state, our work is not going to be done until November. So we have got to stick together. Our race and the Senate race, last time I was on the stage, there were in fact 8 of us. I was very nervous and anxious, as I always am, very respectful of an audience during a debate. But think about how things change and how high those stakes are going to be in November. And what I remind people in our party is the purpose of this isn't just to keep the House. It isn't to gain control of the Senate. It isn't just to set up a framework to take over the White House in 2016. The stakes are so much higher. The stakes are to turn around the United States of America. Amen. We are all worried that our children's children, or our children, are just merely our own family, will not have the opportunities and the freedoms that you and I have had that they won't know the America, and that somehow during our time the baton got dropped. We have got to change the status quo in Washington, D.C., and we've got to do it not just for the next generation of Americans, but we really need to do it for the world. If you look at what's happening right now, I'm scared to death that the American leadership has stepped back in the global affairs. And I'm not saying we need to solve every problem, but here's what I do know. As somebody who's represented 5 of our 8 military installations, anytime the President of the United States apologizes for the actions of America and steps back, the bad guys always step up and fill the void. And when that happens, there's trouble down the road. We have got to maintain a strong national defense. We've got to have a strong economy. We have got to have a balanced budget. We've got to have jobs. And that's what this is all about, so that you and I can pass this great legacy of freedom on to the next generation. Thank you very much for letting me be with y'all tonight. Good luck. I know that Randy and Joe are going to have some tough candidates. I know that our contenders are going to be up for the debate. I just want to say thank you very much. If there's any questions that you have for us, for our campaign, please let me know. Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. And in all fairness, I will tell you that this is a big state, and Mr. David Perdue is down at the coast speaking to the Georgia Federation of Republican Women, which is a good place to be. Yeah. And Jack had the opportunity, totally before our scheduling, he had the opportunity to speak there yesterday. So don't feel like we're ample opportunity wasn't given, but also, you know, you can only, it's a big state, you can only be one place at a time. So thank you, Congressman Kingston, and we look forward to a spirited race for the Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask you a couple of other things. One is when the candidates give their 3-minute opening, you are welcome to applaud. Well, actually, let me say, when they're introduced, you're welcome to applaud. And then when they give their closing, you're welcome to applaud. Beyond that, and we'll say when after they give their opening, you're welcome to applaud. Beyond that, for questions, I will ask you for housekeeping purposes. Let's keep our applause or any comments to yourself, and respect the candidates, but also respect the time that both our candidates and our panelists have committed to allow us the maximum opportunity to hear from Mr. Barr and Mr. Loudermilk. I will, at this time, give a brief introduction to the two candidates, and we will move ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our distinct honor to have 2 very qualified conservative candidates tonight. They are not so, many elections we see one person that's a liberal and one person that's conservative. We're going to see a lot of that in the fall, obviously. I can tell you there's one thing that Georgia's not going to, you can applaud for this. There's one thing Georgia's not going to do, and that is elect Sam Nunn's daughter and Michelle, and but in this race, it's a little different. There is no Democrat. You can applaud for that. There's no Democrat. We know it will be a Republican seat, and we know one of the 2 gentlemen that are here with us tonight will hold that seat. That's something we can be proud of as being part of a conservative state. These 2 men are variations on the theme. We will obviously learn more tonight. But I would be proud to have either of the 2 serve and be my representative in Congress. I'll do just the brief introductions. This man has is here out here at this moment. He has a resume that is long and highly respected. He is an attorney attorney and has done much yeoman's work in that field. He was a U.S. attorney for Ronald Reagan and served our country in that manner. And followed that, he was a member of the class of 1994, the famous class of 1994, when the House was taken over by Republicans for the first time in a generation. We are proud to have him here tonight. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Bob Barr. Equally distinguished, we are while walking on stage at this time, we are most proud to have a member of the Barr County delegation, the state senator. But you know, I like people that come up the ladder the right way. And if you're an activist, he was an activist. He was a county party chairman. Saw the opportunity to become a state representative. Served with distinction in our state house, and now has served in our Georgia State Senate, and is running for Congress in the 11th District. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Barry Loudermilk. We couldn't be more proud to have two other distinguished gentlemen with us tonight, and those are our panelists. They will ask questions of the candidates, and after which we will learn more about them. On the right side, on your left, my right, on the table, Mr. Republican. I mean, you know, anybody that knows this gentleman knows he has served our party for many years, and he was also started out, but as a county party, or not maybe started, but many years ago was a county party chairman. But the thing I always know about Randy Evans is that he doesn't say no when I ask him to do something. This guy is busy traveling all over the country, serving the Republican Party at every level, serving many of our candidates. But he is always willing to show up for a grassroots meeting or to address a small crowd of fledgling Republicans when he's asked, because he knows that's how this party works. He is Georgia's National Committee man. Please join me in welcoming Randy Evans. Next to him, we are proud to have the guy who probably keeps us more informed about what's going on in this county and around this district than any other single individual, because he is the editorial page editor for the Marietta Daily Journal. He is the around town columnist. Everybody, if you're here and you don't read the Marietta Daily Journal on Tuesday, and you need to read it every day, obviously, but if you don't read it on Tuesdays and Saturdays, then you're behind. So it's because it's always news and it's always interesting. And we are proud to have him here tonight. He is always active in the community and all over, but we are really honored to have him here at the Republican Party runoff debate. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Joe Kirby. Candidates and panelists, we have a timekeeper. It is our good friend Darrell Wilson on the front pew, on the front front row. You can tell what I'm used to. On the front row, and Darrell will provide timing for us tonight. Each panelist will ask a question, and each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for an answer. Once a minute and a half goes by, then Mr. Wilson will hold up a 30-second sign. When your 2 minutes is up, he will hold up the knot, the zero. All right. we'll allow you to, we'll allow you to finish that thought quickly, but we won't cut you off. We're all on your side. We want to hear from you, and we're excited that you're here to serve us and for us to learn more. And at this time, I will turn it over to the first candidate to make an opening statement. By coin flip, we decided what the order of the opening statements and the closing statements would be. And the first opening statement will be from Mr. Loudermilk.
Well, good evening. I'm Barry Loudermilk, and first let me thank you for attending this event here tonight. Your participation here shows that not only do you care about this nation, but you care about our children's future. I was born and raised not very far from where we are here tonight, and when I graduated high school, I took a job as a construction laborer in Alaska. And when I was working in Alaska, I also volunteered at a local church where we ministered to underprivileged children. And while I was working at that church, and I met a beautiful young lady who also ministered there to those children, Desiree Loudermilk, as we know her now, but just earlier this year we celebrated our 31st wedding anniversary. Following in the footsteps of my father, who served in the Army in World War II, and my brother, who served in Vietnam, I joined the Air Force. And after 8 years of military service, I returned back to my home state of Georgia, where I started a small business, which I've been running for the past 20 years. Today we have 3 grown children, of which we're really exceptionally proud, but we're especially proud about the newest member of the Loudermilk family, which is my granddaughter, Emma, who was just born 4 weeks ago. You know, we face a lot of challenges in this nation, challenges that are frankly brought on by big government. We have an overwhelming debt that not only threatens our economy, but it threatens our national security, and our liberties and freedoms are continually under attack, as well as those traditional American values that have really made America strong. I believe we can take this nation back, but only if we elect to Congress people who are in tune with the values of their district. Earlier this week, the voters in Virginia sent a message to Congress, a message that was heard across the nation, that if you're going to represent the people, you better know the people. When we started this campaign, we made direct interaction with the voters our #1 priority. During the course of the primary, we knocked on the doors of over 30,000 voters in this district. We held over 30 meet and greets to hear what the voters had to say to us directly, and we made over 10,000 phone calls, personal phone calls, to talk to the voters one-on-one. This wasn't easy, but I believe that if you're going to represent the people, you better know the people. Now tonight, there's going to be a lot of questions asked, and I would venture to say that a lot of our answers are going to be very similar. In fact, we'll all paint a conservative air or go back to our points in our history to show a conservative track record. However, there is only one candidate on this stage who, without exception, has consistently been a defender of conservative Republican values without wavering. There'll be a lot of promises made throughout this campaign. And I can't promise to you in Congress that in a short amount of time we'll fix all of America's problems, but I will promise you this. I know this district. I know the people in this district. And when I get to Washington, D.C., I promise you that Congress will hear the voice of the people of the 11th Congressional District, and they'll hear it loud and they'll hear it clear. The reason I'm running for Congress is simple. Because our children and grandchildren deserve better. Thank you.
Your opening statement, Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here this evening. I'd like to pay a special thanks to Ed Lindsay for being here. He was a wonderful gentleman, fellow barrister, to serve with Barry and I as a candidate in the runoff, and it is wonderful to see him here this evening, as it is to see everybody here. My name is Bob Barr, and I want you to hire me to represent you in the 114th Congress beginning in January of 2015. That's what this is about. This isn't about who's the most conservative, who can walk the walk. It's about who can talk the talk. Anybody can do that. I've served in the House of Representatives. I know that of the 435 men and women who serve in the House, probably 400 of them can talk the talk. That's why they're up there. That's why they were elected. Probably close to 400 of them vote the right way. Yeah, they just sort of sit back, wait for the hard work to get done, wait for the votes to come up on the floor of the House, and then vote the right way. But what you need to represent you, the person that I asked you to hire to represent you in the Congress of the United States, which is serious business, folks,
That's right.
is somebody who not only will vote the right way, somebody who will not only talk the right talk, but somebody who will move our conservative agenda forward. Not tread water, not just do what leadership tells them to do, but who knows how to work to balance the budget, not just talk about it. I've been there, I've done it. Who knows more than simply to talk against illegal NSA spying. I've been there, I've done it, I've held their feet to the fire, I've passed laws that stop them and limit what they're doing. We need somebody up there who will do more than simply talk about immigration reform and stopping the flow of immigration, illegal immigration at our borders, something that is tearing not just at the fabric of our society now, but is posing a national security threat by what this administration is doing to take tens of thousands of children dumped on our border from Mexico. That's where they come in from. They may be from other countries. And instead of shipping them back to Mexico, telling the Mexican government, stop this nonsense, or we're going to cut off aid and possibly even relations with you, what we're doing is we're sending them to U.S. bases, using our resources, our military personnel, to watch over them, and then sending them out in the communities without any guarantee that they will ever come back to court. Friends, you're the bosses. I ask you to send Bob Barr to the Congress of the United States in January of 2015, because I have been there, I have a proven track record of moving our conservative agenda forward. Thank you.
Our first question will be from Mr. Randy Evans.
Well, first of all, Scott, I want to thank you for doing a wonderful job having chaired your convention on occasion. I'm always impressed by the level of planning and detail that go in. And I want to congratulate the two of you for making the runoff. It is no small feat amongst the extremely qualified candidates that you ran against. And you should both be proud, and your supporters should be proud of what you've accomplished. And I would be remiss if I didn't say a kind word about Joe Kirby, and I completely agree. Anyone who doesn't read his article, his column every Tuesday and Saturday, you really don't know what's going on around town. Let me pose my question, and I think it begins with Congressman Barr, and then we'll go to Senator Loudermilk, which is, we learned this week all politics is local. It's a harsh reminder, given what we've seen in races around the country. Putting aside the national issues, which we'll talk about in the balance of this debate, what is the single most important thing for the 11th Congressional District? The single most important job you will have as the Congressman for the 11th Congressional District should you be elected? Congressman Barr?
Randy, it's very difficult, as you know, in posing that question, to choose among the myriad issues that are facing the 11th District now, and that will be facing us in the 114th Congress beginning in January. But if I had to, as you have forced me to do, put my finger on one particular issue that is clearly within the responsibility of the Congress of the United States, of the House of Representatives of the United States, and of the representative from the 11th District, it will be to save Lockheed Martin and prevent the BRAC process, or the insidious way this administration does. They may not have the guts to use a Base Realignment and Closure Commission to launch a frontal assault on Dobbins Air Reserve Base, with which Lockheed is inextricably linked. But they'll do it indirectly, through cuts, through moving far into the future, authorizations and appropriations for additional F-35s and C-130Js, and the additional work that needs to be done on the P-3s, the C-5s. There is a real danger, a clear and present danger, Randy, that within 2 years, we will see a serious cutback in the work at Lockheed and in whether or not Dobbins Air Reserve Base will remain viable. I have fought that battle before against BRAC. I have won that battle before as part of the process that pulled together our community and our congressional delegation in the House and the Senate. We cannot afford a rookie in that job in the next 2 years. It is too important, not just to our national defense, Randy, but to the entire economy of the 11th District and the entire state of Georgia.
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, let me echo something that you said about our supporters. I've got the greatest supporters in the world, and it's because of them that we are here tonight. We surrounded ourselves with people that it's not about the candidate, it's about the cause. And your question was really about the cause. And I do agree with Bob that Lockheed is of extreme importance. And as an aviator, as an Air Force veteran, I know the value that Lockheed brings to this area, and I can submit to you that especially with the experience I have in the state legislature, that is of extreme importance. But there's one thing that supersedes any other issue, and that's an oath of office that every elected official in this nation takes. And that's to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. If there's one thing that is the most important for a congressman to do, it's that. Especially as we see today, that all across this nation, especially in Washington, D.C., we're seeing continual violations by this administration of the Constitution of the United States. And
the House leadership, as we all know, is in a state of flux in the wake of Representative Cantor's defeat. Whichever of you gets elected will take office in the House landscape considerably different than what it has been. So in general terms, will that be to the advantage of a freshman congressman, or does that play to the advantage of a new congressman, but one who has served in Washington before? And I frame that question in the light of fighting to keep Dobbins open. I forget which one the bear.
yeah, I appreciate that question, and we've heard this over and over again, and my worthy opponent doesn't hesitate to let everyone know that he's been to Congress, and I haven't. And that's true. I'm not a Washington insider. But let me tell you this. There is an adage in the House of Representatives and in the state Senate that if you want to get anything done, give it to a freshman. When I was in the Air Force, I was in a course that we were discussing aerospace engineering and flight physics. And I remember the professor was talking about the bumblebee, and at the time, aerospace engineers couldn't understand how a bumblebee could fly, because his body mass was greater than his wing area. And so we asked everyone in the class, he said, how can a bumblebee fly? None of us could answer. He finally said, because no one has told him he can't. Yeah. The first bill that I passed in the General Assembly, when Governor Perdue was signing it, he looked at me and he said, Barry, the Republicans have been trying to pass this for 12 years. How are you able to do the impossible? I said, because Governor, this is the first time I found out that we couldn't do it. You see, freshmen have not been taught that they can't do it. They haven't been corrupted by the system. They're idealistic and they move forward. And I think with that type of fervor is what we need. We need Washington outsiders to go in and change the system. And that's how we can defend Lockheed. I bring the experience and the knowledge, not just of a state legislator, but I know intently from being in the Department of Defense and working in aerospace as well as working in the United States Air Force, and how important it is, and I will bring that knowledge to the table.
I've been called a lot of things, but I've never been called a Washington insider. I think Bill Clinton would disagree vehemently with that. Newt Gingrich, who I opposed on a number of occasions, would disagree with that as well. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I misheard what Barry just said. You know, if you face a very serious problem in Washington, one that goes to the heart of our nation's defense, which involves a very complex process, not just within the Congress, in both houses, but within the administration, cutting across many departments of the government, that the adage in Washington is give it to somebody that doesn't have any idea what they're doing and has just gotten here. That's a new one on me. And I hate to tell you all, but that ain't gonna work. I mean, working through the BRAC process, working through a process in which this administration hides and camouflages their cuts to personnel, to R&D, to authorizations, to appropriations for authorizations that have already been made, takes a great deal of skill. You have to know by having been there, being there, talking with people, not just who are freshmen, but who have been there, committee chairs. Back when I served in the House previously, Barry, there was a serious move by the Republicans to cut back the C-130J program significantly. And I had to go repeatedly to the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee and to the Speaker himself to argue against those cuts, which we were able to get removed. That doesn't happen simply by saying, oh, I'm new here and have a new perspective. It comes from knowing where to go, who to go to, and in my case, using, as I will have when I go up there, not 0 years and being a fresh face, I've never been accused of that either, but going up there and having 8 years of seniority where it really matters, and that is to work the issues, Joe, that you're talking about.
So let me finish just with the concept on military. Having traveled the country, I have to say that it is sickening to see what has happened to our veterans, the veterans hospitals. And I'm candidly embarrassed by it. What would you do as a member of the Congress to get to the bottom of it, but also to hold people accountable for who let this happen? Derek?
My heart breaks when I see what's happened to our veterans. I've lost friends during Desert Storm, and I had friends go to the desert and come back and permanently maimed. And I saw many of my colleagues that were in the military during the time I was serving to get out on full disability. Their life was changed forever, but they went out with the confidence that the United States of America would live up to its contractual obligation to them and would provide them with the health care that they needed. To know that veterans of this nation have died waiting on service, our nation has let them down. We have to get to the bottom of what's happened. But we have to have cooperation from the White House, which emphatically we can't even get to the bottom of Benghazi. I'm not sure we're going to get to the bottom of what happened in this event. In fact, we may get somewhere within Benghazi because who they just appointed to be head of that committee is a good friend and a supporter of our campaign, Trey Gowdy. If anybody can get to the bottom of it, he can. But Congress has to dedicate itself not only to getting to the bottom of this and prosecuting those who were at fault, but we have to come up with new solutions. We just can't keep reinventing the wheel. Folks, what you see in the VA is what you're going to get with socialized medicine through Obamacare. We have to come up with better solutions. One idea that we need to explore is a voucher system. Give our veterans a voucher to go to a community hospital, to one of our hospitals, to where you get good health care. Why should our veterans suffer to have substandard health care when we can give them a voucher and probably save this country a whole lot of taxpayer money? That's one idea that we need to explore. And those are those fresh and new ideas that need to be brought to Congress.
What we're witnessing here with the scandal, and it's scandal with capital S, what we're witnessing here with the scandal in the Veterans Administration, the Department of Veterans Affairs, goes beyond negligence. It goes beyond bureaucratic inertia. It goes beyond a lack of caring. It is criminal. When you look simply at the information that we have seen public, my rule of thumb as President Reagan's prosecutor down here is what you see publicly in terms of the evidence is the tip of the iceberg. But what we have seen just with that tip of the iceberg, that is the public information regarding the scope of this scandal, convinces me that there are criminal offenses that have occurred and may even be continuing to this day as part of what one could call, and may very well depend on the evidence, a RICO case against individuals within the Veterans Administration. There's a lot that can be done, and we have to get done. I have written to the House leadership, for example, and called for a select committee with the explicit purpose to immediately begin a focused investigation using the full subpoena power and contempt power that the House has as a co-equal branch of the government to vest in one single committee the jurisdiction of about 5 different committees to focus the effort. We can't wait for 5 different committees to do this. I also believe it is essential that the Attorney General appoint a special prosecutor to investigate the criminal allegations regarding Veterans Administration. And going down the road beyond addressing this scandal and potential criminal enterprise that is going on, we need to make serious reforms through putting veterans in charge of the Veterans Administration and not bureaucrats.
I believe both of you are opposed to amnesty for those who are in this country illegally. But would you favor a new pathway to legal status for them that would allow them to stay in the country yet not be on the fast track to citizenship? And the second part of this question is, let's talk about legal immigration for just a moment. Are there any circumstances under which you would vote to increase legal immigration and guest worker programs?
One of the things, Joe, that we need to do, and I know that both you and Randy have studied this, as many in our audience have. I know D.A. King is here this evening and has studied this and advocates very strongly and very eloquently for meaningful, real strict enforcement of our immigration laws. There is no way that we need, or that I would ever support, a new pathway to citizenship. I mean, it's a non-starter or non-sequitur. There is a pathway to citizenship. It's laid out in the law based on the constitutional power of the federal government over immigration and the criteria for citizenship. What we do need, and in talking with businesses not only all across the 11th district through our Small Business Advisory Council, but businesses all across Georgia and even elsewhere in the country, as I've had the opportunity to do in recent years, they say it is ridiculous to be operating businesses in the 21st century with immigration laws that relate to lawful work permitting and visas that were crafted in the 1980s. So Congress has a responsibility that it has repeatedly failed to live up to revise and modernize and bring those immigration, work permitting, and visa laws and regulations to meet the criteria, the business needs of businesses here in the 21st century. And that has nothing to do with the underlying and fundamentally essential proposition to secure our border. And it has nothing to do, and should have nothing to do, with citizenship. But to make very clear, I would not favor any amnesty or any new pathway to citizenship, however you sugarcoat it, however you say it, whatever language you say it in.
Well, this has been one of the areas that I have been very, very consistent in during my time here in the state legislature as co-author and supporter of many pieces of legislation to ensure that taxpayer dollars do not go in any way, shape, form, or fashion to support those that are illegally here in this nation. Your question about permanent legal status, there's a very dangerous bill that Congress has been considering, which is called the Enlist Act. Now, the Enlist Act changes a long-standing rule or law that we've had in this country, which is during times of war, someone who already has permanent legal status, not here illegally, but permanent legal status that is not a citizen of the United States, can enter into the armed forces. And if they complete their enlistment period and they get an honorable discharge, then they can seek a pathway to citizenship. What the Enlist Act would do would allow those that are illegally here to go into the military, which would give them a default fast track to permanent legal status, which would give them a pathway to citizenship. This is a backdoor way of providing a fast track or a backdoor path to citizenship, and we must stop the Enlist Act as well. We have to. That's one of the things when you're dealing with legislation, you just can't always look at what is that talking point of the day or what is that news item of the day. You have to look deep. You have to read every piece of legislation. I have been clear, crystal clear, that I oppose any pathway to citizenship. We have to secure the borders. I have been consistent on that. We should not have open borders and let anybody just come into this nation just because they go through a secure checkpoint. We also must ensure that we reform our immigration system and enforce the laws that we have on the book. It always amazes me where legislatures decide, well, we need a new law, but we're not even enforcing the laws on the book. Secure the border, enforce the laws we have on the book, and fix a broken legal immigration system before we try to tackle anything else.
If I can break in and follow up very briefly, you both did a really good, comprehensive job of answering the first part of my question. And I guess my question was too long and convoluted, so let me ask the second part of it again. Is there any circumstance under which you would vote to increase legal immigration and guest worker programs?
I guess that's my...
You go.
Okay. One of the problems we have in this nation is we have overregulated a guest worker program that actually worked. I went to South Georgia. In fact, when we were looking at immigration in the state of Georgia, I just didn't want to haphazardly just take the front line and make the news saying I'm supporting this bill because we knew it was popular. We went and spent a week on the border learning the problems that we were having. When I came back, I went and I spent a day with South Georgia farmers to learn the problem. We have put so much red tape in the guest worker program that it no longer works for our farmers. We should have a workable guest worker program, one like we used to have before this administration started tinkering with it, one where the farmers would basically submit to ICE and how many workers they need. The foreign workers would submit to their governments, they would do a background check. The farmer goes to the border, he picks up the workers, he brings them back to the farm, or whatever business is in, provides them with a place to live, a way to make their meals, and when their work period is over with, they are responsible to take them back to the border. What's happened is we have so mired this program with red tape and bureaucracy that many of those guest workers are afraid they're not going to get back into the nation. So they stay here. Thus it adds to our illegal immigration problem. We must have a guest worker program that works. Let me tell you, if we were to enforce the laws we have on the books as they are now, which our president seems to just ignore most of the laws, we can fix most of the immigration problems without new legislation.
I'm not sure I heard an answer in there, but let me try and do a little clearer job of answering your question, Joe. As I mentioned in the answer to your question initially, we do need to bring our federal laws regarding work permitting and visas into the 21st century so that they meet the needs of 21st century businesses, not late 20th century businesses. And if that means adjusting and looking at the number of immigrant workers who want to come into this country lawfully under a work permit or visa in certain areas ought to be increased, and absolutely we ought to. And they may very well need to be decreased in other areas because those are not the areas the businesses now, as opposed to the 1980s, needed people. That's what we need. I was on the phone just last week with a friend of mine who owns a very successful landscaping business that landscapes in the entire Atlanta area and other states. And he was saying he wants to hire people. He wants work. He wants to bring tax revenue to Georgia. But because the laws, as they are currently crafted, do not allow him to bring in sufficient numbers of workers from abroad legally to meet that demand, he can't do it. So he's losing business. The community is losing tax resources. That's a perfect example of what needs to be done to even out our work permitting and visa system. And if in some areas we need to increase them, then yes. That is business-oriented, that is pro-American, and it's pro-business, and we need to do it.
So I guess it starts with Congressman Barr. As Republicans, we all agree that the debt, the deficit, and spending is out of control. The issue, however, that divides our caucus in the U.S. House is how far to go. And the question I have for you is, in order to control spending, would you vote to again shut the government down? If so, why? And if not, why not?
When we had the budget battles, Randy, as you well remember, and you were very intimately involved in working those issues with us in the House back in the late 1990s with Clinton. Sometimes it is necessary to force a president to the negotiating table to refuse to pass bills that he wishes to pass reflecting the budget numbers that he wants. And when Tom DeLay was our majority whip, and Dick Armey was our majority leader, and Newt was our speaker, we had a team and a philosophy of governance that said, and we held the line on this, we will not allow and did not allow a single spending bill sought by the Clinton administration to come to the floor of the House for a vote. Now that precipitated a brief so-called government shutdown, which, as you know, wasn't really a government shutdown. It simply was a temporary cancellation of non-essential government services, which raises the question, why we're paying for them anyway. We'll leave that aside. So sometimes it is necessary to come to that point when an administration, such as the Clinton administration, and now the Obama administration, refuses to properly and legitimately negotiate with the Republicans in the House, who are in the majority in the House, in order to be able to pass a budget and or a continuing resolution. So yes, it does become necessary sometimes when you have an administration that will not negotiate in good faith. Sometimes that's the only way, and we have to take it then.
We're talking about a debt. Because of Congress's deficit spending, a small businessman, I at least have the common sense to know that you can't spend more than you take in without going bankrupt. We have increased this debt to unbelievable amounts, $18 trillion by the end of this fiscal year. To give you an idea of how much $18 trillion is, if you go back to the birth of Christ and you put $16,000 in the bank every 60 seconds, you still wouldn't have $18 trillion today. Just the interest payment on that debt could have bought 2,700 F-35 fighter planes, and they cost $151 million a piece. This is a national security issue. Sometimes you have to take a hard stand. When I was in Washington, D.C., when FreedomWorks named me one of the top 5 most conservative candidates in the nation, we addressed this issue. And I said the problem we have in the House of Representatives is really a leadership problem more than anything. Because the Republicans are putting their finger in the air. They're seeing which way the wind is blowing, and sometimes you just have to make the hard stand. The problem we have is our Republican brethren have been more interested in staying in power than doing anything with the power. Yeah. And sometimes you just have to make a solid and bold stand. And you know what? Do sort of like the Democrats did to get Obamacare. It should have never passed. It was the most unpopular bill in modern history. But how did they pass it? Because Nancy Pelosi was willing to sacrifice her speakership for a cause she believed in. That's what we need to be doing as Republicans. Sometimes you have to make a stand. And yes, in that instance, I believe we would have to make a stand or make a stand and say no. We will not continue to expand this debt ceiling and further put our children in jeopardy.
I want to talk for a minute about Iraq. Ask you about that. Many people feel that by pulling our troops out prematurely for self-serving political reasons, President Obama has squandered the victory that George Bush finally won in Iraq. And meanwhile, we're not exactly winning the war in Afghanistan either. And it sort of puts Obama on the brink of being the first U.S. president ever to lose 2 wars. With that victory in Iraq now crumbling, what would you advise him to do in Iraq? And in light of the debacle in Iraq, should we step up, or pull out from Afghanistan? I forget which one of you it's supposed to go.
I think that's my turn. Well, let me tell you, that's a question that I take close to heart because my son, my youngest son, is an airborne pathfinder, and he's susceptible to be deployed into any of these fields of battle. But when he enlisted in the United States Army, he took a oath of office. And it's our responsibility to make sure that when we send our young men and women into harm's way, that they're there for the right reason. We have to have a clear and present danger to the security of the United States. This is a tough call because I was speaking with someone today, and we were out doing some campaigning, and he told me that a friend of his who was in Iraq during the war of Iraq called him and he said, "I now know what my Vietnam brethren felt when they saw the fall of Saigon." I feel like what we have done it not. If there is a clear and present danger that Iraq poses, we must intervene on behalf of the safety and security of the United States. But if it does not, then we should not be engaged. I can't answer that question right now because unlike when I was in the military, I was in intelligence, and I had more of the information during that time period. But we must set very clear criteria of when do we intervene and when do we put our young men in harm's way. As far as Afghanistan, we should have learned our lesson from the Soviets.
Yeah.
That is a war that I think we're not going to win. We must, and one of the problems that we never had a clear objective. Going into that, as being in the military, we had to know what our objectives were before we went in, or at least to continue to sustain. The Taliban is still there, as we have learned in the last week. But I do think, without a clear objective, it's time to pull our troops back out of Afghanistan. There are much more hostile enemies that we are facing today.
Was the question, how would I advise the president?
Yeah, if he said, "Bob, what should I do about Iraq?" what would you tell him? And what would you tell him about Afghanistan?
Well, what I would tell Obama is resign now. You're in way over your head. Every day you stay in office, you are harming the fabric, the economy of this country, and our nation's security, not just for this year, not just for next year, but for the next generation. And setting the example of cutting and running, and not even having the ability to stand before the American people 2 days ago, when all of this was unfolding, even he had to have read about it in the newspapers, for him to then say, "Well, gee, I'll have to study that." For heaven's sake, he's the President of the United States, and he can't make up his mind what to do when he sees some of the most radical militants on the face of the earth that are so radical, Al-Qaeda won't even have them, marching by the thousands right through the heart of Iraq, through Mosul, to Crete, Nineveh, all the way down, now almost to the walls of Baghdad. And he doesn't know what to do? I mean, that is absolutely disgraceful. Meanwhile, there are reports that we are leaving American contractors there to fend for themselves, people that we asked to go over there to help out with the effort. Specifically, though, if he doesn't take my advice to resign, then I would advise him to use the airstrike capability that we have, both manned and drone capability, in this situation. The targets are clear. There's very little danger with these folks marching down the highway of collateral damage, as they say, killing innocent civilians. They provide a perfect target. We have the weaponry to do it for surgical airstrikes and drone strikes. This is one area where I would support the use of drones.
So in 2012, crazy Uncle Joe said, Bin Laden is dead and GM is alive. And what we know 2 years later is that Al-Qaeda is still deadly, and so is GM. how would you reprioritize the focal point of the federal government, given these conflicting boundaries, which is to protect us from terror while simultaneously reviving our economy? Senator?
Could you repeat that one more time? I was thinking.
I'm not going to repeat the whole thing.
Just the question.
Just the question part is, how would you balance the priorities between protecting Americans from terror while simultaneously reviving the economy?
Wow, that's two really broad subjects. How would you protect the citizens against terrorism and still and invigorate the economy? I mean, that's definitely a balance that we have to look at. The big problem we have is where do we put our resources? Where are we spending our money? Well, the bailouts and TARP was an unconstitutional role of government. If you go back and you look at the founding of our nation, one of the issues that our founding fathers faced in 1776 was the British government bailing out a business that they deemed too big to fail and tax the colonists to pay for it. It was the East India Tea Company, who was on the verge of bankruptcy. And they determined, well, we need to bail them out because they're too important to the economy. Well, the founders didn't take that very well. They thought that was tyranny. And so they took all the tea and they dumped it in the harbor of Boston. Most people don't realize the history of the Boston Tea Party. National security is one of the constitutional roles of government. If you look at the Constitution, as the predominant role of our government is national security. Funding our military is the highest priority that our government has. To stimulate the economy, it's pretty simple. Less government, not more government, less government, reduce the regulation. If you look at what's going on right now in Washington, D.C., our president is legislating from the White House through policies and procedures and regulation. Congress has to withdraw that from the president. They have to control him through the budgetary process and take that power back. So I don't think that there's really a conflict if we follow conservative Republican principles by reducing regulation and prioritizing our spending on defense.
The Constitution very carefully, the responsibilities, the specific enumerated responsibilities for deciding how our military is going to be funded. The responsibilities of the military is vested in the Congress. The Congress needs to reassert its proper role to set those spending priorities and not let the administration constantly run roughshod over the Congress. That would help tremendously, because I think we'd see a much, particularly in this case, where we have a commander-in-chief who has no business being the commander-in-chief, to be honest, where we have that situation. Congress does need to reassert its role. I think it's also important to keep in mind that we can and must protect our nation against terrorism without sacrificing our civil liberties here at home. That is extremely important. We don't need the NSA spying on virtually every email or every cell phone message that an American engages in. With regard to the economy, there is an awful lot that we can do that the Congress can do. I know a lot of folks like to say, well, we need a balanced budget amendment, we need an amendment for this, that, and the other thing. We don't. The tools are there. We've done it before. We balanced the budget. When I was a member of the House back in 1997, after being in the majority of the House for a mere 2.5 years, because we had leadership, we had vision, and we held an administration's feet to the fire over and over and over again and ensured that we brought that administration to the negotiating table and got a balanced budget. It's Congress's job. This administration won't do it. We need to do it in the Congress. I've been there, I've done it.